The rain had been falling over Seattle since late afternoon. The kind of rain that doesn't announce itself with thunder, but seeps quietly into your bones. I was sitting on the leather sofa in the living room, my hands folded in my lap, staring at the papers on the glass table in front of me. My name is Sarah Mitchell. Across from me sat my husband of 7 years, Robert Mitchell. He didn't look angry. He didn't look sad either. His face was calm, polished, almost professional, as if we were closing a business deal instead of ending a marriage. The sharp click of his pen echoed in the room when he placed it down. That sound cut deeper than any raised voice ever could. "Sign it," Robert said. His tone was flat. "There's no reason to drag this out." I looked down at the divorce papers. His signature was already there, bold, confident, final. Outside, rain strayed down the windows, blurring the city lights into long, trembling lines. For a moment I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, as if someone had tied a knot around it. "This house is in my name," he continued, standing up and straightening his jacket. "Car too. You came into this marriage with nothing, and you'll leave the same way. I'll give you some money. Enough to rent a room and get back on your feet. Consider it courtesy." Courtesy. 7 years collapsed into that single word. I had poured most of my savings into this home. I had built my business while supporting his career. I had believed every promise he ever made. And now he was erasing me with the same ease he used to erase emails. "Why?" I asked quietly. My voice barely sounded like my own. "What did I do wrong?" Robert smiled. Not warmly, not kindly. It was the smile of someone who had already moved on. "You didn't do anything wrong, Sarah," he said. "You just don't fit into my life anymore." That was when the bedroom door opened. My mother-in-law, Helen Mitchell, walked in slowly. She was wearing silk pajamas, her hair neatly brushed, her expression composed. She glanced at the papers, then at me, and let out a short, dismissive laugh. "What are you waiting for?" she said sharply. 7 years, and you still haven't given this family anything worth keeping. Sign and go." I stood up, my hands shaking. "I paid for this house. I paid for your medical bills. I paid for Jessica's education. I didn't take anything from this family." Helen's eyes hardened. "Proof," she snapped. "Where's your proof? Everything is in my son's name. You gave what you gave because you wanted to. Now stop embarrassing yourself." She turned to Robert. "Throw her out. I don't want her under this roof another minute." He didn't hesitate. He grabbed my arm, dragged me to the front door and pushed me outside. I stumbled, falling hard onto the cold stone porch. The rain soaked through my clothes instantly. The door began to close. At the last second, Helen stepped out, holding an old, torn canvas bag. The one I used to take to the market. She threw it at my feet. "Take your trash," she said coldly. "And never show your face here again." The door slammed shut. I was alone, soaked, shaking, sitting in the rain with nothing but a suitcase and a ragged bag beside me. I picked up the bag with trembling hands. And when I opened it, everything changed. Before that night, before the rain and the divorce papers, I believed I was one of the lucky ones. Robert and I met when we were both young and hopeful. He had just moved to Seattle, full of ambition, but still finding his footing. I had recently graduated and was pouring every ounce of energy I had into a small fashion boutique I named Lark and Lane. It was nothing glamorous at first, just a narrow space, a few racks of clothing, and a dream that felt bigger than the room itself. Robert used to sit on a stool near the register while I worked late. He would watch me fold clothes, manage inventory, talk to customers. He told me he admired my drive. He said I inspired him. I believed him. We married quietly. No grand venue, no luxury honeymoon. Just family, close friends, and promises whispered with absolute certainty. After the wedding, we lived modestly. I kept growing my business, slowly turning one boutique into 2, then 3. Lark and Lane became profitable, stable, respected. I never hid that success from Robert. I shared my numbers. I shared my plans. I shared my wins. I thought marriage meant transparency, teamwork, trust. When Robert struggled early in his career, I supported him without hesitation. When he landed his first major promotion, I celebrated him like it was my own achievement. And when he talked about wanting to give his family a better life, I didn't question it. His parents lived in an aging house that needed constant repairs. When his mother fell ill, I paid for the treatments without ever mentioning money. When the bills piled up, I handled them quietly. I told myself that this was what family did for one another. Then there was his sister, Jessica. She was bright, ambitious, and eager to leave Seattle to chase bigger dreams. When she talked about expensive programs and opportunities she couldn't afford, I saw myself in her younger years. I offered to help, not as a loan, not with conditions, just help. For years I sent money regularly. Tuition, living expenses, everything she needed so she could focus on building her future. I sacrificed vacations. I postponed expansions. I told myself it was temporary, that it would all be worth it one day. As Lark and Lane stabilized, I stepped back from daily operations. I wanted to be more present at home. I cooked. I organized. I waited for Robert at night. I believed I was investing in our marriage the same way I had invested in my business. I never thought of myself as generous. I thought of myself as loyal. And loyalty, I would soon learn, is the easiest thing to exploit when it is given without protection. The change didn't happen overnight. That was the most dangerous part of it. First, it was subtle. Robert started coming home later than usual. He said work was demanding more of him, new clients, new expectations, new pressure. I believed him because ambition had always been part of who he was. Then the late nights turned into missed dinners. Missed dinners turned into weekends spent networking. His phone was always face down. His answers became shorter, colder. When I asked if something was wrong, he sighed like I was exhausting him. "You worry too much," he said. "This is just how success looks." Around that time, Jessica came back to Seattle. She wasn't the same girl I had supported for years. She dressed differently, spoke differently. She talked about circles I didn't recognize and opportunities one didn't understand. She teased me about staying home too much, about focusing on my business instead of enjoying life. "A woman needs to keep up," she once said casually. "Men get bored when things feel predictable." I laughed it off. I thought she was just young and blunt. I didn't realize she was testing boundaries. Robert began going out with her more often. Dinners, events, private gatherings. He said Jessica was helping him make connections. I wanted to be supportive, so I stayed quiet. But the house felt different. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped listening. When I tried to talk about Lark and Lane, he waved me off. "You've already made your money," he said once. "Let me focus on mine." That sentence stayed with me. Sometimes he came home smelling unfamiliar, not like cologne, like someone else. When I asked, he snapped. "Do you hear yourself?" he said. "You sound paranoid." I started questioning my instincts instead of his behavior. I cooked his favorite meals. I dressed better. I tried harder. And the more I tried, the more distant he became. He spoke to me like a problem that needed managing, not a partner who deserved honesty. Helen noticed too. She grew sharper with me, more critical. She commented on how quiet I was, how little space I seemed to take up. "You've changed," she said once. "You used to be more useful." I told myself it was stress. I told myself all marriages went through seasons. I told myself patience was strength. What I didn't know was that patience to the wrong people looks exactly like permission. And while I was trying to save a marriage, Robert and Jessica were quietly preparing to end it on their terms. I just didn't know yet that I wasn't losing control. I was being pushed out of it. The rain slowed to a thin, icy drizzle as I walked away from the house I had once called home. My suitcase rolled behind me, its wheels catching on cracks in the sidewalk. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I couldn't stay there any longer. I stopped beneath the awning of a closed cafe and sat down on the cold concrete. My hands were numb. My thoughts were empty. The only thing beside me was the torn canvas bag Helen had thrown at my feet like a final insult. I stared at it for a long moment. It was the same bag I used to take to the market. Faded, frayed at the edges, ordinary. I expected to find a few old clothes inside. Maybe things they didn't bother to keep. With a slow breath, I opened it. The first thing I saw wasn't clothing. It was a small, dark blue passbook wrapped in clean leather, new, completely out of place. I took it out, confused. The bank name was familiar. My hands began to shake as I opened the first page. Account holder Sarah Mitchell. Balance $20 million. I closed it, opened it again, read the numbers once more. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might pass out. This didn't make sense. I had never opened an account like this. I had never seen this kind of money in my life. Beneath the passbook was a folder of documents, neatly organized and sealed property papers. The address wasn't the house Robert had thrown me out of. It was a townhouse in Queen and one of the most desirable neighborhoods in Seattle. Owner Sarah Mitchell, paid in full. My vision blurred. I pressed my fingers into my arm, grounding myself in the cold, solid pain. This was real. Had to be. At the bottom of the bag, I found an old prepaid phone and a folded letter taped carefully to the back of it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Helen, I unfolded the letter slowly, my breath shallow. Sarah, if you are reading this, you are probably hurt. You are probably angry, and you have every right to be. What I did today was cruel. It was deliberate, and it was the only way I could protect you. Robert and Jessica have been taking money from your company. Not carelessly, systematically. They planned to leave you with nothing once they were finished. If I had warned you openly, they would have moved faster and destroyed evidence. So I played the role they expected. I let them believe I was on their side. The money and the property are yours. I moved what I could quietly and legally. Use the phone in this bag. Do not use your old one. Pretend you are broken. Pretend you have nothing. This is not over. But now you are no longer alone. My chest tightened as tears finally fell. Not from despair this time, but from something I hadn't felt in a long while. Oh. I closed the bag, my hands steady now. The storm wasn't over, but I finally understood that it had never been meant to destroy me. It was meant to wake me up. I didn't go to my mother's house that night. Instinct told me not to. If Robert or Jessica decided to look for me, that would be the first place they checked. Instead, I called Monica Hayes. Monica was someone I had helped years ago when she first moved to Seattle. We weren't inseparable friends, but there was trust between us, the kind built quietly without expectations. Her voice cracked with concern when she heard mine. "Of course you can stay," she said without hesitation. "Come now." Her apartment was small, tucked into an older building far from the city center. It wasn't luxurious, but it was warm, safe. She handed me dry clothes and a mug of tea without asking questions. That night I told her just enough. I said my marriage had ended. I said I had been forced out. I didn't mention the money. I didn't mention Helen. I needed the story to be simple, believable. Even kindness could become dangerous if it knew too much. When Monica finally went to sleep, I sat alone on the couch with my laptop. I logged into the internal system for Lark and Lane. First, everything looked normal: sales, payroll, inventory. Then I focused on expenses from the last 6 months. My eyes stopped on a category labeled consulting and marketing services. The payments were consistent. Too consistent. Each month, large sums were sent to a firm called Blue Ridge Consulting LLC. I frowned. I didn't remember approving any long-term consulting contract, especially not one with numbers like these. I searched the company name. The registration details loaded slowly, each second stretching my nerves tighter. Owner and legal representative Robert Mitchell. The room felt suddenly too quiet. I leaned back, staring at the screen. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't carelessness. It was a plan. Robert had built a shell company using my money, funneling funds out of the business I created while standing in front of me every night and asking what was for dinner. My phone vibrated. A message from the prepaid phone. They believe you left with nothing. They are already relaxing. Stay quiet. I'm watching. Helen. I closed my laptop and exhaled slowly. For the first time since the rain soaked my clothes, I felt something solid beneath the fear. Control. They thought the story was over. It was just beginning. Once I knew where the money was going, the next question became unavoidable. Who was helping him? Robert didn't have direct access to Lark and Lane's accounting system. He never had. I had kept financial controls tight from the beginning, not out of distrust but out of habit. Good business required structure, which meant someone on the inside was opening doors for him. One name surfaced immediately. Claire Stevens. Claire had been my head accountant for 5 years. Quiet, precise, reliable. She knew every invoice, every approval process, every safeguard I had put in place. I trusted her enough to stop checking behind her. And that trust suddenly felt very heavy. I pulled up older records and began comparing them side by side. The consulting invoices from Blue Ridge Consulting were clean on the surface. Proper formatting, correct language, the right signatures to write. They all followed the same structure, same wording, same timing, as if they had been copied and adjusted just enough to look legitimate. My phone vibrated again. This time it was an audio file from Helen. I hesitated before pressing play. Robert's voice filled the room, tense and sharp. "She can't find anything," he said. "You made sure the records look clean, right?" Claire answered, her voice lower, strained. "Yes, but if she pushes for an audit, we'll need to erase the backup files." "Do it," Robert replied. "Clean everything. No trace." The recording ended. I sat still, listening to the silence that followed. They weren't just stealing. They were preparing to destroy evidence. That was when I understood something crucial. People don't make mistakes when they feel threatened. They make mistakes when they feel safe. Robert believed I was broken. Claire believed she was untouchable. And Helen had been right. The more helpless I appeared, the more careless they would become. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't send emails. I didn't demand answers. Instead, I did nothing. I let them believe their plan was working. Because the truth was, every file they touched, every record they tried to erase was leaving behind something far more dangerous than paper. Proof. And I was finally ready to let them create it for me. I didn't confront Robert. I didn't call Claire. I didn't warn anyone. Instead, I went to the one place I had avoided since the night everything collapsed. My mother's house. Rachel Mitchell had always lived quietly, far from the noise of my marriage and my business. When she opened the door and saw me standing there with tired eyes and rigid posture, she didn't ask questions. She pulled me into a hug and let me breathe for the first time in days. I told her everything, not just about the divorce, but about the money leaving my company, the shell firm, the recordings, Helen's letter. I expected shock. What I saw instead was something steadier. Clarity. "You don't need comfort," my mother said calmly when I finished. "You need protection." That same afternoon, she introduced me to Marcus Sullivan. Marcus was not loud. He didn't overreact. He listened without interrupting, flipping through documents while the recordings played. When he finally looked up, his expression was firm but controlled. "This isn't just a divorce," he said. "This is financial misconduct, fraud, and possibly obstruction if they destroy records." I asked the question I had been avoiding. "Can I win?" Marcus shook his head slightly. "That's the wrong question. You already have enough to act. The real question is how you want this to end." He laid out the options clearly. Civil action to reclaim funds and assets. Criminal investigation if evidence destruction continued. And timing, he stressed, would determine everything. "If you move too soon, they retreat," he said. "If you wait, they expose themselves." That was when the strategy took shape. I would remain silent, cooperative, apologetic if necessary. Marcus would file a preservation notice under the pretext of asset division, forcing internal review without triggering panic. And we would let Robert and Claire do what careless people always do when they believe they've won. They would rush. They would erase. They would leave fingerprints. Before I left his office, Marcus looked at me directly. "This will get uncomfortable," he said. "They will say things, post things, rewrite the story. You'll need discipline." He nodded. I had already survived being thrown into the rain. Discipline wasn't the hard part. That night, I returned to Monica's apartment and played my role carefully. I spoke little. I moved slowly. I let worry show. I allowed silence to do the work. On my phone, a new message appeared from Helen. "Jessica is planning something public. Big. She wants to celebrate her new life." I stared at the screen. Public stage. A place where confidence would turn into carelessness. I typed back one line. "Me know when." I set the phone down and looked out the window at the city lights. Robert thought I had reached the end. What he didn't understand was that endings don't begin with noise. They begin with patience. Jessica's party became the center of everything without her realizing it. She talked about it openly. A celebration of new beginnings. A chance to introduce her new circle. A statement. According to Helen, the venue alone cost more than most people earned in a year. Robert was paying for all of it. Marcus moved quietly. He submitted a formal request for document preservation to Larkin Lane, framed as a routine step in the divorce process. Nothing aggressive, nothing alarming, just enough to create pressure without revealing intent. Inside the company, I scheduled a short meeting. Kept my tone soft, uncertain. "I've been told there may be a review," I said, looking around the room without making eye contact. "If there's anything missing or unclear, please double-check. I don't want problems." Claire's face tightened for half a second. She recovered quickly, but it was enough. That evening, Helen sent another message. No commentary, just an audio file. Claire's voice sounded rushed this time. "He's nervous," she said. "If this review goes deeper, we're exposed." Robert replied without hesitation. "Then don't let it go deeper. Clean it. All of it. Tonight." I didn't feel anger when I listened. Felt distance. Marcus explained later that digital systems don't forget the way people think they do. Deleted files leave trails. Altered records create patterns. Attempts to erase history often end up documenting intent. We prepared quietly. Server logs were secured. Backups were mirrored. Access times were recorded. Everything Claire touched that night was tracked. Meanwhile, Jessica's excitement grew louder online. Photos of dresses, table settings, vague captions about fresh starts, and cutting dead weight. Robert appeared in the background of nearly every image. Smiling, relaxed, certain. I stayed invisible. No posts, no messages, no reaction. Silence became my shield. 2 days before the event, Marcus called me. "They're done," he said. "They tried to cover it. That's what seals it." I stood by the window after the call ended, watching the city move as it always had. People rushing, lights changing, life continuing. Robert believed the party would confirm his victory. Jessica believed it would announce her arrival. Neither of them realized it would be the moment their story stopped being theirs to control. And all I had to do was show up. The Fairmont Olympic Hotel glowed that night, polished and flawless, like nothing ugly could exist inside its walls. Crystal lights reflected off marble floors. Music drifted through the ballroom in smooth, confident rhythms. Guests moved easily from laughter to champagne. Dressed in confidence and expensive fabric, Jessica stood at the center of it all. She wore a fitted ivory dress, her smile practiced, her posture proud. This was her moment, a public declaration that she had stepped into a better life. Robert stood nearby, relaxed, one arm resting casually around Andrea Lawson, the woman he had replaced me with. They looked untouched by consequence. I arrived quietly. No dramatic entrance, no announcement. I walked in with Marcus Sullivan and 2 notaries, blending into the edges of the room until the moment arrived. A few heads turned, whispers followed. People recognized me. The discarded wife. Jessica froze when she saw me. Robert's smile faltered just slightly, enough to notice. Before either of them could react, the host tapped the microphone and invited everyone to direct their attention to the main screen for a special presentation. That was my cue. I stepped forward and took the microphone from his hand. "My name is Sarah Mitchell," I said evenly. "And tonight I brought a gift." The screen lit up. The first images were simple. Photos of Robert's parents' old home, medical invoices, tuition payments, each labeled clearly. Dates, amounts, my name. A quiet murmur spread through the room. Then the next slide appeared. Blue Ridge Consulting LLC. Bank transfers flowed across the screen in clean lines. Monthly payments, identical amounts. The company registration followed. Robert Mitchell, owner. Gasps replaced whispers. I didn't rush. I let the information breathe. The final segment played next. An audio recording filled the ballroom. Robert's voice. Claire's voice. Clear. Unmistakable. Clean everything. No trace. The silence afterward was heavy. Andrea slowly stepped away from Robert, her expression shifting from confusion to disgust. Jessica's face drained of color. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. Marcus stepped forward. "These documents have been notarized and preserved," he announced. "Formal complaints have been filed. This is now a legal matter." The room erupted. Questions flew. Accusations followed. Phones were raised. Conversations broke apart as quickly as the illusion had formed. I placed the microphone back on the stand. I didn't look at Robert. I didn't need to. Truth doesn't argue. Simply stands there undeniable, while everything built on lies collapses around it. As I walked out of the ballroom, the music never resumed. The party was over and so was their control. The fallout began before the night was over. By morning, the story had spread far beyond the ballroom. Messages filled my phone from people who had watched the scene unfold, from partners who had quietly stepped away from Robert, from employees who finally understood why things had felt wrong for months. Marcus moved faster than public opinion. Formal complaints were filed. Financial records were secured under court order. Robert and Claire were summoned for questioning before they could coordinate their stories. Travel restrictions followed soon after. Quiet but firm, closing doors they hadn't yet realized were about to slam shut. Inside Larkin Lane I resumed control. Not with speeches, not with accusations. I froze questionable accounts, reassigned access, initiated an independent audit that spoke in numbers instead of emotion. The results were clear, thorough, and impossible to dismiss. Jessica's role came next. She wasn't charged with theft, but her involvement wasn't ignored. Messages, introductions, pressure applied at the right moments, enough to establish that she had known, encouraged, and benefited. She stopped posting. Robert tried to reach me once. I didn't answer. Not because I was afraid and not because I wanted to punish him. There was simply nothing left to say. The legal process didn't need my anger to function. It needed facts, and it had them. As the investigation unfolded, people asked how I felt, whether I felt satisfied, whether exposing everything in public had brought me peace. The truth was simpler. I didn't feel victorious. Felt finished. Finished carrying confusion that wasn't mine. Finished protecting people who never protected me. Finished shrinking myself to keep someone else comfortable. Revenge seeks pain. Accountability seeks balance. What happened to Robert and Claire wasn't something I created out of bitterness. It was the result of choices they made when they thought no one was watching. I didn't destroy their lives. I stepped out of the way and let the truth do its work. And for the first time since the rain soaked through my clothes that night, I slept without bracing myself for impact. I thought the story ended there. I was wrong. A week after the investigation became public, Helen asked me to meet her. Not at the old house, not at a cafe. She sent me an address in downtown Seattle and a time. I arrived early. The building was modern, all glass and steel, overlooking the bay. Inside, the lobby was quiet, polished, efficient. A receptionist greeted me by name before I said a word and escorted me to the top floor. That should have been my first clue. Helen was waiting in a private office with floor-to-ceiling windows. She wasn't wearing silk pajamas this time. She wore a tailored blazer, her posture straight, her expression steady. "Sit down, Sarah," she said gently. I did. She didn't begin with an apology. She began with the truth. "This company," she said, gesturing toward the city below, "is mine. I founded it with my father decades ago. I stepped back publicly, but I never gave up control." Whitmore Development Group, one of the largest real estate firms on the West Coast. The words settled slowly. She explained that she had lived quietly by choice. That wealth had taught her how quickly people changed once they believed they were entitled to it. She wanted to see who her children were when they thought she had nothing left to offer. Robert and Jessica had answered that question for her. "You," she said, meeting my eyes, answered a different one. She told me she had watched how I treated her before money or power was ever visible. How I paid bills without reminders, how I showed up without being asked, how I gave without keeping score. "That's why I stepped in," she said. "Not to punish them, to protect you." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were documents, training plans, a formal offer. She wanted me to take an executive role within the company, to learn, to lead, to eventually replace her. I stared at the papers, my heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "I don't belong here," I said honestly. Helen smiled softly. "You didn't belong in the rain either," she replied. "But you survived it." I left the building with a folder tucked under my arm, and a strange calm in my chest. The marriage had ended, but something far larger had just begun. I didn't step into my new life with celebration. I stepped into it quietly. I took the role Helen offered, not as a reward, but as a responsibility. I studied. I listened. I learned how power worked when it wasn't loud, when it didn't need to prove itself. For the first time, I wasn't building something to save a relationship. I was building something to honor myself. Robert faded into the background of my life. So did Jessica. Not because I erased them, but because they no longer belonged in my future. What stayed with me was clarity. Love without boundaries is not devotion. It is risk. Trust without structure is not faith. It is exposure. If there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this. Walking away doesn't always mean losing. Sometimes it's the moment you finally stop bleeding. If you've ever rebuilt your life after betrayal, share your story in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. If this story spoke to you, like, share, and subscribe to The Art of Revenge, because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming untouchable. Thank you for staying with Sarah's story until the very end. Stories like this are not about revenge for the sake of pain. They are about truth, boundaries, and the quiet strength it takes to walk away when staying would cost you everything. Sarah didn't win because she exposed anyone publicly. She won because she stopped accepting less than she deserved. She chose clarity over chaos, accountability over anger, growth over bitterness. If you see yourself in any part of her journey, know this. You are not weak for trusting. You are not foolish for loving deeply. But you do have the right to protect what you build emotionally and financially. On this channel, The Art of Revenge, we share real-life inspired stories of people who were pushed to the edge and chose to stand back up with dignity. If this story resonated with you, please like the video, share it with someone who may need to hear it, and subscribe for more stories like this. And if you have a story of your own, one about resilience, loss, or reclaiming your life, leave a comment below. Your story might be the one that helps someone else survive their storm. Until next time, take care of yourself and remember that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply refuse to stay where you are no longer valued. The weeks that followed were not easy, but they were honest. I showed up at Whitmore Development Group every morning, not as someone seeking validation, but as someone ready to learn. Helen didn't hand me power. She taught me how to wield it. She showed me balance sheets that stretched back decades, introduced me to architects and investors, walked me through negotiations where silence held more weight than words. I learned that real authority doesn't announce itself. Doesn't need to. I also learned that my story wasn't unique. Helen told me about others, women and men who had given everything to people who saw generosity as weakness, loyalty as opportunity. She said the world was full of people who mistook kindness for stupidity, and that the greatest skill anyone could develop was knowing when to stop giving to those who only knew how to take. One afternoon, as we reviewed contracts in her office, she paused and looked at me directly. "You know why I chose you?" she asked. I shook my head. "Because you didn't ask for this," she said. "You didn't demand it. You didn't feel entitled to it. You survived something that would have broken most people, and you still showed up with dignity. That's rare." I felt something shift inside me then. Not pride exactly. More like recognition. I had spent so many years trying to prove I was enough for someone else. Now I was learning that I had always been enough for myself. Meanwhile, Robert's world continued to collapse in ways I no longer needed to witness. The legal process moved forward without my involvement. Marcus handled everything with precision. The stolen funds were traced, documented, returned. Blue Ridge Consulting was dissolved. Claire lost her license. Jessica's reputation crumbled in circles that had once welcomed her. I didn't celebrate any of it. I simply allowed it to happen. One evening months later, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Robert. I almost deleted it without reading. But curiosity, or maybe closure, made me open it. "I'm sorry," it said. "I know that doesn't fix anything. I know I don't deserve a response. But I needed to say it." I stared at the words for a long time. Once, an apology like that would have meant everything to me. It would have made me question my anger, second-guess my choices, wonder if I had been too harsh. Now it just felt late. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to say. Forgiveness wasn't something I owed him. Peace was something I owed myself. And I had already found it. A year after that rainy night, I stood in front of a different building. This one wasn't glass and steel. It was brick, weathered, full of character. It was the new location for Lark and Lane, expanded, reimagined, stronger than it had ever been. I had partnered with Whitmore Development to create something bigger, a hub for small businesses, a place where people like me, people who had built something from nothing, could grow without fear. The grand opening was quiet, intentional, no spectacle. Just people I trusted, people I respected, people who had shown up when it mattered. Monica was there. Rachel was there. Marcus was there. And Helen stood beside me, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder as I cut the ribbon. "This is just the beginning," she said softly. I believed her. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't building something to save someone else. I was building something because I finally understood my own worth. That night, I returned to the townhouse Helen had secured for me, the one I had discovered in that torn canvas bag. It was mine. Fully, legally, undeniably mine. I poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Robert was living with the consequences of his choices. Somewhere out there, Jessica was learning that shortcuts always have a cost. And somewhere out there, someone else was probably sitting in the rain, holding divorce papers, wondering how they would survive. If I could speak to that person, I would tell them this. You will survive. Not because the pain will disappear overnight. Not because justice will always be swift or satisfying. But because survival isn't about what was taken from you. It's about what you refuse to let them keep. Your dignity, your clarity, your future. I set the glass down and opened my laptop. There was work to do. Not the kind that drained me, but the kind that filled me. I wasn't running from anything anymore. I was building toward something. And that, I realized, was the greatest revenge of all. Not destruction. Not bitterness. Not even exposure. It was becoming so completely, undeniably whole that the people who tried to break you became irrelevant. I closed the laptop and smiled. The rain had stopped a long time ago. And I was finally dry. The following spring brought changes I hadn't anticipated. Lark and Lane wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The business hub we created became a model others wanted to replicate. Magazines featured it. Entrepreneurs reached out. What started as one woman's quiet defiance had become something larger than I ever imagined. Helen began stepping back more intentionally, trusting me with decisions that once would have terrified me. Board meetings. Major acquisitions. Long-term strategy. She watched from the side, offering guidance only when I asked, letting me find my own voice in rooms that had once intimidated me. "You don't need me anymore," she said one afternoon over coffee. I started to protest, but she held up her hand. "That's not an insult, Sarah. That's the goal. I didn't save you so you could depend on me. I saved you so you could stand on your own." She was right. I had become someone I didn't recognize from that rainy night. Stronger, yes, but also quieter, more certain, less interested in proving anything to anyone. One morning I received an envelope at my office. No return address. Just my name written in handwriting I recognized immediately. Jessica. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single page, handwritten, no pretense. "Sarah, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know that I see it now. What I did. What I became. I convinced myself you had everything and I deserved some of it. I told myself you wouldn't even notice. But you did notice. And you didn't just notice, you fought back in a way I never expected. You didn't scream. You didn't beg. You just became untouchable. I lost everything. My reputation, my opportunities, my brother. I deserved all of it. I'm not writing this for sympathy. I'm writing this because you were right. And I was wrong. And I needed to say it out loud, even if only on paper. Hope you're happy. I genuinely do. Not because I think it balances anything, but because someone like you deserves to be. Jessica. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. Not to treasure it. Not to use it. Just to acknowledge it. Accountability, I had learned, didn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrived quietly, in handwriting on paper, too late to change anything but still worth witnessing. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. But I didn't throw it away either. That afternoon I met Rachel for lunch. My mother had changed too over the past year. She was lighter, prouder, more at peace. She told me she had started volunteering, mentoring young women who were trying to start businesses with nothing but determination and hope. "You inspired that," she said simply. "Watching you rebuild. Watching you refuse to stay down. It reminded me that strength isn't about never falling. It's about what you do after." We ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then she asked the question I had been avoiding. "Do you ever think about him?" I didn't pretend not to know who she meant. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Not the way I used to. I don't miss him. I don't wonder what he's doing. I just think about who I was when I was with him. And I'm grateful I'm not her anymore." Rachel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "That version of you wasn't weak, Sarah. She was just trusting the wrong people. There's a difference." He nodded. She was right. The woman who sat in the rain that night wasn't a failure. She was someone who had finally seen the truth. And that truth had set her free. Later that week, I received an invitation. It was from a women's business organization, asking me to speak at their annual conference. The topic was resilience after betrayal, building success from loss. I stared at the invitation for a long time. Part of me wanted to decline. I didn't want to be defined by what Robert had done to me. I didn't want to be the woman whose story was always about survival. But then I thought about the letter in my drawer. I thought about the women Rachel was mentoring. I thought about every person who had messaged me after that night at the hotel, saying my story gave them courage to leave, to fight, to stand up. My story wasn't just mine anymore. And maybe that was the point. I accepted the invitation. The day of the conference arrived faster than I expected. I stood backstage, listening to my introduction, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes waiting on the other side of the curtain. For a moment, I felt that old fear creeping back. What if I said the wrong thing? What if I wasn't inspiring enough? What if they judged me? Then I remembered something Helen had told me months ago. You're not responsible for how people receive your truth. You're only responsible for telling it. I walked onto the stage. The applause was warm, encouraging. I stood at the podium and looked out at the faces in the crowd. Women of all ages, all backgrounds, all carrying their own stories of loss and survival. "My name is Sarah Mitchell," I began. "And I'm not here to tell you that everything happens for a reason. I'm not here to say that betrayal is a blessing in disguise. What happened to me wasn't a gift. It was devastating. It was cruel. It nearly destroyed me." I paused, letting the honesty settle. "But I'm still here. And if you're in this room right now, so are you. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's choice. The choice to keep going when stopping felt easier. The choice to protect yourself when everyone else told you to forgive and forget. The choice to believe that you deserved better, even when the world tried to convince you otherwise." I told them about the rain, the divorce papers, a canvas bag. I told them about Margaret, no Helen, and how she taught me that love without boundaries is just exposure. I told them about the party, the evidence, the moment everything changed. But I also told them about the aftermath. Quiet work, the rebuilding, the slow, unglamorous process of becoming whole again. "People want to hear that revenge feels good," I said. "And sometimes it does. But what feels better, what lasts longer, is knowing that you don't need revenge because you've already won. You won the moment you stopped letting someone else define your worth." The applause at the end wasn't just polite. It was thunderous. Women stood. Some were crying. Others were nodding, recognition in their eyes. Afterward, dozens of people approached me. They shared their stories, their pain, their questions. One woman, younger than me, gripped my hand tightly. "I'm sitting in my own rain right now," she whispered. "I don't know if I can get up." I looked at her directly. "You can," I said. "Not today, maybe. Soon. And when you do, you'll realize the rain wasn't trying to drown you. It was washing away everything that was never meant to stay." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. And I knew, in that moment, that everything I had survived had led to this. Not just my success, not just my healing, but the ability to stand in front of someone else's storm and say, with absolute certainty you will make it through. That evening, I returned to my townhouse and sat in the same spot by the window where I had sat so many times before. The city glowed in the distance, alive and indifferent, continuing as it always had. My phone buzzed. Message from Marcus. "Saw your speech. You were incredible. Proud of you." Another from Monica. "You made me cry in the best way. Thank you for sharing your story." And one from Helen. "You've become exactly who I knew you could be. Now go further." I smiled and set the phone down. The rain had stopped long ago. But its lessons remained. I had learned that survival isn't about avoiding pain. It's about refusing to let pain define you. I had learned that strength isn't loud and steady. I had learned that the greatest revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's becoming so completely at peace that their absence no longer matters. And I had learned that sometimes, the life you lose is the one you were never meant to keep. Because the life you build after is the one that was always waiting for you. I stood up, stretched, and looked at my reflection in the window. I didn't see the woman who sat in the rain anymore. I saw someone new, someone whole, someone free. And for the first time in a very long time I was excited about tomorrow. Not because I had conquered anyone, but because I had finally conquered the fear that I wasn't enough. I always had been. And no one, not Robert, not Jessica, not anyone could ever take that away from me again. The story could have ended there. But life, I was learning, doesn't believe in neat endings. 2 years after that conference, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from a hospital. The voice on the other end was professional, detached. "Ms. Mitchell, we have a Robert Mitchell here. He's listed you as his emergency contact. There's been an accident." My first instinct was to hang up. My second was to say they had the wrong person. But something made me ask, how bad? Critical. "He's asking for you." I sat in silence for a long moment after the call ended. Helen's words echoed in my mind. "You're not responsible for people who hurt you, even when they're suffering." I didn't owe Robert anything. Not my time. Not my presence. not my forgiveness. But I went anyway. Not for him. For me. To close a door I didn't realize was still slightly open. The hospital room was sterile, quiet except for the rhythmic beep of monitors. Robert lay in the bed, thinner than I remembered, his face drawn and pale. When he saw me, something broke in his expression. "You came," he whispered. "I didn't think you would." I didn't sit down. I stood near the door, arms crossed, waiting. "Why did you list me as your contact?" Yes. He closed his eyes. "Because there's no one else. Jessica won't speak to me. My mother, Helen, she cut me off completely. I lost everything, Sarah. My career, my reputation, everyone I thought cared about me. They all walked away when the money did. Felt nothing. No satisfaction. No pity. Just emptiness." "You're telling me this like I'm supposed to feel sorry for you," I said quietly. "You took everything from me first. You planned it. You executed it. You threw me into the rain with nothing. The only difference is I survived. I rebuilt. You're not suffering because life was unfair to you, Robert. You're suffering because your choices finally caught up with you." He opened his eyes and I saw tears there. Real ones this time. "I know," he said. "I know I don't deserve your sympathy. I don't deserve anything from you. But I need to say this before I'm sorry. Not because I want something from you. Not because I think it fixes anything. I'm sorry because you deserved better. You deserved honesty, respect, partnership. And I gave you none of that. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I destroyed it because I was selfish and stupid and thought I deserved more than I had. I was wrong. About everything." I stood there, watching him, this man who had once been my entire world. And I felt the final thread of connection between us dissolve. "I forgive you," I said finally. His eyes widened in surprise. "Not because you've earned it. Not because what you did was okay. I forgive you because carrying anger toward you was taking up space I needed for my own life. So I'm letting it go. Right here, right now. Not for you. For me." I turned toward the door. "Wait," he called out weakly. "Are you happy? Did you find what you were looking for?" I paused, my hand on the door handle. "I found something better," I said without turning around. "I found myself." I walked out of that hospital room and didn't look back. In the parking lot I sat in my car for a while, hands on the steering wheel, breathing slowly. It was done. Truly, completely done. I drove to Helen's house. She was in her garden, gloves on, tending to roses she had planted decades ago. When she saw my face, she set down her tools and waited. I told her about the hospital, about Robert, about what I had said. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she smiled gently. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Free," I said. And I meant it. That evening, we sat on her porch watching the sunset. The sky turned gold, then pink, then deep purple. Helen poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me one. "You know what the best part of your story is," she said. I looked at her. "You didn't just survive, Sarah. You transformed. And transformation is rarer than survival. Anyone can survive if they have to. But choosing to become better, stronger, more compassionate after being hurt. That's exceptional." I thought about her words long after I returned home that night. She was right. I could have survived and stayed bitter. I could have survived and closed myself off. I could have survived and spent the rest of my life afraid to trust anyone. But I didn't. Chose differently. And that choice had made all the difference. Months passed. Seasons changed. Life continued its forward momentum. Larkin Lane expanded into 3 more cities. Whitmore Development launched a mentorship program for women entrepreneurs, with me as its director. I spoke at more conferences. I mentored more women. I watched them find their strength, just as I had found mine. One afternoon I received a package. No return address again. Inside was a small wooden box, beautifully carved. And inside that box was a note. "Sarah, I don't know if you'll remember me. My name is Elena. I was at your conference 2 years ago. I was the woman who told you I was sitting in my own rain. I just wanted you to know I got up. Took time. It was hard. Some days I didn't think I could do it. But I remembered what you said. The rain wasn't trying to drown me. It was washing away what was never meant to stay. I left. I rebuilt. I started my own business. And today I signed my first major contract. I made this box myself. It's small but it's strong. Like a thank you for showing me it was possible. Elena. I held the box in my hands, feeling its weight, its craftsmanship, its meaning. This, I realized, was the true measure of success. Not money. Not revenge. Not even justice. It was this. The ripple effect. The knowledge that my pain had meaning because it helped someone else survive theirs. I placed the box on my desk where I could see it every day. A reminder that our stories don't end with our survival. They continue in everyone we help along the way. And isn't that the real revenge after all? Not destroying those who hurt us, but building something so meaningful, so enduring, that their betrayal becomes nothing more than the prologue to our greatest chapter. I had survived the rain. I had rebuilt from nothing. I had transformed pain into purpose. And now I was helping others do the same. Robert, Jessica, the betrayal, the divorce, none of it defined me anymore. They were simply the storm I walked through. On my way to becoming who I was always meant to be. Unbreakable, unstoppable, untouchable, and finally completely, utterly free. 5 years after that rainy night, I stood in a place I never imagined I'd be. Not physically but emotionally. I had achieved what most people spend lifetimes chasing. Success, stability, respect, independence. But more importantly, I had achieved something rarer. Contentment. Lark and Lane had become more than a business. It was a legacy. We had 12 locations now, each one designed not just to sell clothing but to tell stories. Stories of craftsmanship, sustainability, and the women who created them. I hired seamstresses who had lost jobs to automation. I partnered with single mothers who needed flexible work. I created apprenticeships for young women who couldn't afford traditional education. The business hub at Whitmore Development had inspired similar projects in 4 other cities. Helen and I had become more than partners. We were family, chosen family, the kind built on respect and shared values rather than obligation. My mother, Rachel, had written a book about her experience watching me rebuild. It became a quiet bestseller, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. She donated all proceeds to a fund we created together, the Second Chances Foundation, providing legal and financial support to people navigating difficult divorces. Marcus Sullivan had become one of my closest friends. He still handled my legal matters, but more than that, he had become someone I trusted completely. Someone who understood that strength wasn't about never needing help. It was about knowing when to ask for it. Monica Hayes had flourished too. With my support, she had opened her own catering business. It was thriving, and she never let me forget that she had been there when I had nothing. "You gave me a place to sleep," I once told her. "That was everything." She had smiled and replied, "You gave me hope that good people still exist." That was more. One autumn morning, I received an email that made me pause. It was from a university I'd never heard of, in a small town I couldn't place on a map without looking. "Dear Ms. Mitchell, we are reaching out to invite you to speak at our graduation ceremony. Our students come from difficult backgrounds. Many are the first in their families to attend college. Many have survived abuse, poverty, abandonment. They have requested you specifically. They say your story reminds them that survival is just the beginning. Please consider. These young people need to hear from someone who understands that success isn't about where you start. It's about refusing to stay down. Sincerely, Dean Patricia Morrison." I stared at the email for a long time. Then I called Helen. "I got invited to speak at a college graduation," I said. "That's wonderful," she replied. "So why do you sound uncertain?" "Because I keep thinking about that woman in the rain," I said quietly. "The one who had nothing. The one who was broken and scared and didn't know if she'd survive the next day. What would she think about all of this? Would she even recognize me?" Helen was quiet for a moment. That woman in the rain was you, Sarah. She's still part of you. But she's not all of you. She was one chapter. You've written 10 more since then. And each one was stronger than the last. But what if I fail them? Ask. What if my words aren't enough? What if they're looking for answers I don't have? Then you tell them the truth, Helen said simply. That you don't have all the answers. That some days are still hard. That healing isn't linear. But that it's still worth it. That they're still worth it. I accepted the invitation. The campus was small, nestled between rolling hills and old trees. The students wore their caps and gowns with pride, their faces bright with hope and uncertainty. As I stood backstage, listening to the dean's introduction, I thought about who I had been 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I thought about the girl who had started Lark and Lane with nothing but determination and a dream. The woman who had married Robert believing in forever. The wife who had given everything and watched it be taken away. The broken figure sitting in the rain, holding a torn canvas bag and wondering if she'd survive the night. And I thought about who I had become. Not in spite of those moments but because of them. I walked onto the stage. The applause was warm, genuine. I stood at the podium and looked out at hundreds of young faces, each carrying their own invisible weight. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that everything happens for a reason, I began. I'm not going to say that hard times make you stronger, or that what doesn't kill you makes you invincible. Because that's not always true. I saw some students lean forward, surprised by the honesty. Sometimes hard times just hurt. Sometimes betrayal just breaks you. Sometimes loss just leaves you empty. And pretending otherwise doesn't help anyone. I paused, letting the words settle. But here's what I will tell you. You don't have to be unbreakable to survive. You don't have to be fearless to move forward. You just have to be willing. Willing to get up one more time. Willing to try again when trying feels impossible. Willing to believe that your story isn't over just because someone else wanted it to be. I told them about the rain. About Robert and Jessica and Helen. About the canvas bag that changed everything. But I also told them about the years that followed. Quiet work. The small victories. The days when I cried in my car before walking into a meeting. The nights when I questioned everything. The moments when I almost gave up. Success isn't a straight line, I said. It's messy. It's full of setbacks and self-doubt and days when you wonder if you're doing anything right. But here's the secret no one tells you. Everyone feels that way. The only difference between people who make it and people who don't is that people who make it keep going anyway. I looked directly at them, these young people on the edge of their futures. You've already survived things that would have destroyed others. You're here in these caps and gowns, despite everything that tried to stop you. That's not luck. That's strength. And if you can survive what you've already survived, you can build anything. I talked about boundaries. About knowing when to walk away from people who diminish you. About understanding that loyalty to yourself is just as important as loyalty to others. Love yourself enough to leave situations that require you to constantly prove your worth, I said. The right people, the right opportunities, the right life, they won't ask you to shrink. They'll give you room to grow. I talked about forgiveness, but not the kind that requires you to trust people who broke you. Forgiveness isn't about letting people back into your life. It's about releasing the power they have over your peace. You can forgive someone and still never speak to them again. You can acknowledge their apology and still keep your distance. Forgiveness is for you, not them. As I spoke, I saw recognition in their eyes. Understanding. Some were crying. Others were nodding. All of them were listening like their lives depended on it. You're going to face people who don't believe in you, I continued. People who underestimate you. People who think your kindness is weakness. Let them sleep on you. Let them think they've won. And then, quietly, without drama or announcement, prove them wrong. Not for revenge. For yourself. I glanced at my notes, then decided to set them aside. I came here thinking I needed to inspire you. But the truth is, you've already done the hardest part. You've survived. You've shown up. You've refused to quit. Now all you have to do is keep that same energy as you move forward. Build businesses. Build families. Build art. Build whatever calls to you. But most importantly, build a life that honors who you are, not who someone else needs you to be." The applause started before I finished my last sentence. It grew louder, more insistent. Students stood. Faculty joined them. The dean was wiping her eyes. I stood there, absorbing the moment, feeling the weight of connection, of shared understanding, of collective resilience. After the ceremony, students lined up to speak with me. They shared their stories, their fears, their dreams. One young man told me his father had kicked him out for being gay. "I've been living in my car and studying in the library," he said. "But I graduated. Top of my class." I hugged him. "You're going to do incredible things," I told him. "Because you already have." A young woman with a baby on her hip approached me shyly. "I'm a single mom," she said. "Everyone told me I couldn't do this, that I should give up on school and just work. But I didn't listen. I graduated. And I start my master's program in the fall." I looked at her baby, then at her. "Your child is watching you," I said. "You're teaching them that obstacles are just that. Obstacles, not endings. That's the greatest gift any parent can give." Hours passed. The sun began to set. Finally, the last student approached. She was small, quiet, her eyes red from crying. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I know you're probably tired. I needed to thank you." "You don't need to apologize," I said gently. "Tell me your name." "Maya," she whispered. "My mom died when I was 15. My dad couldn't handle it. He started drinking. I raised my 3 younger siblings while finishing high school. I almost didn't come to college. I almost gave up so many times." She pulled out a folded piece of paper from her pocket. "I've been carrying this for 2 years," she said. "It's a quote from one of your interviews. You said, 'You're not selfish for wanting more than survival. You're human.' That sentence saved my life. Because I thought wanting to go to college while my siblings needed me was selfish. But you made me realize I could do both. I could help them and still help myself." Tears streamed down her face. "I got a full scholarship. I'm studying social work. I want to help families like mine. And none of this would have happened if I hadn't read those words. If I hadn't believed I deserved more than just surviving." I pulled her into a hug as she sobbed against my shoulder. "You didn't just deserve college, Maya," I said softly. "You deserved someone to tell you how extraordinary you are, how strong, how capable. And I'm honored to be one of those people." When she finally pulled away, she was smiling through her tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." I watched her walk away, and I felt something shift inside me. Completion. Circle closing. This was why I had survived. Not just for me, but for Maya. For Elena. For every person who needed to hear that their pain had meaning, that their struggle had purpose, that their story wasn't over. I drove home that night as the stars emerged above me, feeling lighter than I had in years. When I arrived at my townhouse, I sat in my car for a moment, looking at the building that had once represented my lowest point. The place I had discovered in a torn canvas bag on the worst night of my life. It wasn't a symbol of loss anymore. It was a symbol of transformation. I walked inside and went straight to my office. I opened the drawer where I kept Elena's wooden box and Jessica's letter. Artifacts of a journey I had never planned but had walked anyway. I added something new that night. The program from the graduation ceremony, signed by Maya and dozens of other students. Then I opened my laptop and began to write. Not for publication. Not for an audience. Just for me. "Dear woman in the rain," I typed. "I know you're scared right now. I know you think this is the end. I know you're wondering if you'll survive what's happening to you. I'm writing from 5 years in your future to tell you this. You will. You'll do more than survive. You'll transform. You'll build things you can't imagine yet. You'll help people you haven't met. You'll become someone you don't recognize, in the best possible way. The rain isn't drowning you. It's washing away everything that was never meant to stay. So when you're ready, when you catch your breath, stand up. Pick up that bag. Open it. And start walking toward the life that's been waiting for you all along. With love, the woman you'll become. I saved the document and closed my laptop. Outside my window, the city lights glowed steady and constant, just as they had on that rainy night 5 years ago. But I was different now. Stronger. Wiser. Free. I poured myself a glass of wine and raised it toward the window. To survival, I whispered. And everything that comes after. I drank slowly, savoring the moment, the silence, the peace that had taken years to build but was finally, completely mine. The story of Sarah Mitchell, the woman who sat in the rain, was over. The story of Sarah Mitchell, the woman who rose from it, was just beginning. And this time I was writing it myself. The years continued to unfold in ways both expected and surprising. I turned 43 surrounded by people I loved, people I had chosen, people who had chosen me back. The celebration was small, intimate, held at the Whitmore Development offices overlooking the bay. Helen, now in her 70s but still sharp as ever, raised a glass. To Sarah, she said. The daughter I chose. The leader I trained. The woman who proved that the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's character. I felt tears prick my eyes, but they were good tears. The kind that came from gratitude, not grief. Marcus was there with his wife. Monica had brought her teenage daughter, the one who had been a baby when I first stayed at her apartment. Rachel sat beside me, her hand in mine, pride radiating from her smile. Make a wish, someone called as they brought out the cake. I closed my eyes, but I didn't wish for anything, because for the first time in my life I had everything I needed. That winter, Helen called me into her office. Her expression was serious but calm. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. I need to tell you something, she said. I've been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. They've given me 6 months, maybe a year. The words hit me like a physical blow. Helen. She held up her hand. I've made my peace with it, Sarah. I've lived a full life. I've built things that will outlast me. And most importantly, I've found someone worthy of continuing what I started. She slid a folder across the desk. This is my will. You're inheriting Whitmore Development. All of it. Not because you're like a daughter to me, though you are, but because you've earned it. You understand what this company was built to do. You'll protect it, grow it, use it to help others the way I helped you. I can't, I whispered. Helen, this is too much. It's not too much, she said firmly. It's exactly right. Robert and Jessica taught me a valuable lesson. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, but character does. And yours is unshakable. I spent Helen's final months by her side. We worked together, laughed together, said everything that needed to be said. She introduced me to board members, walked me through decades of decisions, shared stories about her father and the early days of the company. Don't mourn me for too long, she said one afternoon. Her voice weak but her eyes still bright. Mourn me for a day, maybe 2. Then get back to work. Keep building. Keep helping. That's how you honor me. Helen passed away on a quiet Tuesday morning in spring, surrounded by the people she loved. No drama, no suffering at the end. Just peace. At her funeral, I delivered the eulogy. Helen Mitchell didn't save me because she felt sorry for me, I said, looking out at the crowd. She saved me because she recognized something in me that I didn't yet see in myself. She taught me that strength isn't about never falling. It's about who you become when you rise. I paused, my voice thick with emotion. She taught me that real power is quiet. That real wealth is measured in the lives you change, not the money you accumulate. That real success is building something that outlives you. I looked at her photo on the stand beside me. Helen, you didn't just give me a second chance. You gave me a purpose. And I promise you I won't waste it. Everything you built will continue. Everyone you helped will remember. And the woman you saw in me when I couldn't see her myself. She's finally here. And she's grateful. So grateful. The audience was silent except for quiet crying. After the funeral, I returned to Whitmore Development as its new CEO. The transition was smooth because Helen had prepared me well. But it was also bittersweet, walking into her office, sitting at her desk, knowing she wouldn't walk through the door with advice or a knowing smile. I kept a photo of her on my desk. Beside it, I placed Elena's wooden box and the graduation program Maya had signed. Reminders of why any of this mattered. 1 year after Helen's death, I received an unexpected visitor. My assistant buzzed me. "Ms. Mitchell, there's a Jessica Parker here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." My first instinct was to say no. But curiosity or maybe closure made me agree. Jessica walked in looking nothing like the confident woman who had helped destroy my marriage. She was thinner, older, humbled. She stood awkwardly by the door until I gestured to a chair. "Thank you for seeing me," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," I replied honestly. "What do you want, Jessica?" She took a breath. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I'm here because I've been in therapy for 3 years. Part of my recovery is making amends where possible. I know you don't owe me forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I needed to sit across from you and say I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry." I studied her face. There was no manipulation there, no hidden agenda. Just regret. "I destroyed my own life," she continued. "I lost my career, my reputation, my relationship with my mother. Helen cut me off completely before she died. She never forgave me. And I don't blame her." She wiped her eyes. "I've spent years asking myself why I did it. Why I helped Robert steal from you. Why I convinced myself you deserved it. And the truth is, I was jealous. Jealous of your talent, your success, your marriage, even though it was falling apart. I wanted what you had, and when I couldn't have it, I helped destroy it. And now," yes, "now I work at a non-profit helping women rebuild after financial abuse," she said. "Ironic, I know. But it's the only way I can make sense of what I did. I can't undo the past, but I can try to stop it from happening to someone else." I sat back in my chair, processing her words. "I don't forgive you because you apologized," I said finally. "I forgave you years ago because holding on to anger was hurting me, not you. But I appreciate you coming here. I appreciate you doing the work to become better." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. That's more than I deserve." "Maybe," I said. "But people are more than the worst thing they've ever done. You hurt me terribly, Jessica. But you're trying to make it right. That counts for something." She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Helen was right about you. You're extraordinary. I see that now." After she left, I sat alone in my office for a long time. The Jessica who had helped steal from me was gone. In her place was someone trying to be better. It didn't erase the past, but it did close another door. 2 years after Helen's death, I stood at another podium. This time it was at the opening of the Helen Mitchell Center for Women's Empowerment, a facility that provided legal aid, financial counseling, housing assistance, and job training for women leaving abusive situations. This building stands as a testament to a woman who understood that wealth means nothing if it doesn't help others, I said to the gathered crowd. Helen Mitchell saved my life. And now, through this center, she'll save countless others. The center was fully funded by Whitmore Development, operating entirely free of charge for those who needed it. We had hired a staff of 30, including lawyers, counselors, and job placement specialists. In the first year alone, we helped 300 women leave dangerous situations and rebuild their lives. I received letters from them, cards, photos of them in their new apartments, at their new jobs, with their children smiling beside them. Each one reminded me of why I had survived, why I had fought, why Helen had believed in me. One evening, as I locked up my office, I caught my reflection in the window. I stopped and really looked at myself. My hair had threads of silver now. Lines had formed around my eyes from years of smiling and squinting at spreadsheets. I looked older but not tired. Older but not defeated. I looked like a woman who had survived a storm and used the experience to build shelter for others. I thought about Robert then, for the first time in months. I had heard through distant channels that he had moved to another city, working a modest job, living quietly. He had never remarried, never rebuilt what he'd destroyed. I felt neither satisfaction nor pity, just neutrality. He was someone I used to know, nothing more. I thought about the woman I had been that rainy night, sitting on the porch with nothing but a suitcase and a torn bag. If I could go back and whisper in her ear, what would I say? This isn't the end. It's the beginning. The pain you're feeling right now will transform into purpose. The betrayal will teach you discernment. The loss will show you what truly matters. You're not being destroyed. You're being refined. And the woman you'll become will be worth every tear you're crying tonight. I drove home slowly, taking the long route through the city. Past the hotel where I had exposed the truth. Past the cafe where I had opened the canvas bag. Past the old house that I had once called home but now belonged to strangers. I didn't feel sadness looking at these places. Felt distance. They were chapters in a book I had already finished reading. When I finally arrived at my townhouse, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window one last time, watching the city lights flicker against the darkness. My phone buzzed. A text from Maya, the student from the graduation ceremony. Hi Sarah. I just got accepted into a PhD program. I'm going to study trauma and resilience. Because of you. Thank you for showing me what's possible. I smiled and typed back. Congratulations. I'm so proud of you. Now go change the world. I set the phone down and raised my glass toward the window. 2 endings, I whispered. And the courage to let them lead to new beginnings. The rain had fallen years ago. But its lesson remained etched in everything I had become. I had learned that rock bottom isn't the end of your story. It's the foundation you build on. I had learned that the people who betray you do you a favor. They show you who doesn't belong in your next chapter. I had learned that success isn't measured by what you gain, but by what you do with what you've been given. And I had learned that the greatest revenge isn't making someone pay for hurting you. It's becoming so fulfilled, so purposeful, so genuinely at peace that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. Robert had tried to erase me. Instead he had freed me. Jessica had tried to diminish me. Instead she had taught me boundaries. The rain had tried to drown me. Instead it had washed away everything that was never meant to stay. And in the empty space left behind, I had built a life beyond anything I could have imagined. A life of meaning, of impact, of quiet, steady strength. I was Sarah Mitchell. Not the woman who had been betrayed. Not the woman who had been thrown into the rain. I was the woman who had risen from it. And my story, the real story, wasn't about what had been done to me. It was about what I had done with it. I finished my wine and stood, stretching my arms above my head. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new people to help. But tonight I would rest, peacefully, completely, without fear. Because I had finally learned the most important lesson of all. You can't control who hurts you. You can't control who betrays you. You can't control who walks away. But you can control who you become after. And I had become exactly who I was meant to be. Unbreakable. Not because nothing could hurt me, but because I knew how to heal. Unstoppable. Not because I never fell, but because I always got back up. Untouchable. Not because I was perfect, but because I no longer needed anyone's approval to know my worth. The rain was over. The storm had passed. And I, at last, was home. Then, if this story touched you, remember, your worst moment doesn't define you. What you do after does. You are stronger than you know. You are more resilient than you think. And your story, like Sarah's, isn't over until you decide it is. Stand up. Dust yourself off. And start building the life you deserve. The rain doesn't last forever. And neither does the pain. But the strength you gain, that's yours to keep. Now write call to action. 12:36 a.m. Call to action. Thank you for staying with Sarah's story until the very end. Her journey from betrayal to triumph wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming power, rebuilding with purpose, and refusing to let someone else's actions define her future. If Sarah's story resonated with you, here's what I want you to do. 1. Like this video if you believe that survival is just the beginning, not the ending. 2. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's a friend going through a divorce, a family member facing betrayal, or someone who just needs a reminder that rock bottom can become a foundation. Your share might be exactly what saves someone today. 3. Subscribe to The Art of Revenge for more real-life inspired stories of resilience, transformation, and quiet strength. We share stories of people who were pushed to the edge and chose to stand back up with dignity. 4. Comment below and tell us, where are you watching from? Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? What's one lesson from Sarah's story that hit home for you? Your story matters. Your voice matters. And you never know, your comment might be the encouragement someone else needs to keep going. 5. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Because every week, we bring you narratives about people who transformed pain into power, loss into legacy, and betrayal into breakthrough. Remember this: you are not weak for trusting. You are not foolish for loving deeply. But you do have the right to protect what you build, emotionally, financially, and spiritually. Walking away doesn't mean you lost. Sometimes it means you finally stopped bleeding. If you're sitting in your own rain right now, know this: you will survive this. Not because it doesn't hurt, it does. Not because it's fair, it isn't. But because you have something inside you that's stronger than any storm. The will to keep going. The rain doesn't last forever. And neither does the pain. But the strength you gain from surviving, that's yours to keep. Until next time, take care of yourself. Set boundaries. Protect your peace. And never forget, the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so completely whole that the people who tried to break you become irrelevant. This is the art of revenge. We'll see you in the next story. Now go, subscribe, and start writing your own comeback story. Because your chapter isn't over. It's just beginning.